Tonight, Trump keeps fueling his feuds. That as he continues to attack the widow of a fallen soldier, her mother, and their congresswoman. The widow gives her side of the story. All this as one of Trump's favorite foils, John McCain, strikes back. Why does our president seem so intent on fighting with just about everyone except those who flatter him? Then, nearly 55 years since that fateful day in Dallas, the government set to release a trove of documents related to the Kennedy assassination. Is this another distraction from the administration? And why are so many Americans obsessed with conspiracy theories, especially where JFK is involved? And later, it's among the most watched and most nasty campaigns in our region this year. Tomorrow, we host a live debate between the candidates for Westchester County Executive. We'll preview the debate with two of the three debate panelists who are on our panel this evening. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Monday evening. We're going to have those stories, plus the massive Bill O'Reilly sexual harassment settlement and the latest on the Menendez trial with a report from New Jersey, all in the next 60 minutes. But we begin with the latest chapter in the sad story that dominated headlines last week. Frankly, it got unseemly. Questions about President Trump's phone call to the widow of a soldier killed in Niger. By now, you probably know the backstory. The press conference questions that began the flap and the president's lie about other presidents calling Gold Star families. Then, the widow's mother, their congresswoman, and Chief of Staff John Kelly all got caught up in it. Well, today, we heard from the fallen soldier's widow, who backed up all the claims that the president tried to deny. Sergeant LaDavid Johnson's casket had just arrived at the airport when his widow, Maisha, received a call from President Trump.
I was very angry at the tone of his voice and how he said it. Like he couldn't remember my husband's name, and that what hurt me the most, because if my husband is out here fighting for our country and he risks his life for our country, why can't you remember his name?
In an exclusive interview with Good Morning America, the Gold Star widow validated Congresswoman Frederica Wilson's account of the call, saying the president made her cry even more.
What she said was 100% correct.
But President Trump disputes that on Twitter, writing this morning, "I had a very respectful conversation with the widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson and spoke his name from the beginning without hesitation." On The View, Senator John McCain said America should be focused on what's happening in Niger and not the president's call.
We should not be fighting about a brave American who lost his life serving his country. That should not be the topic of discussion in America today.
And on that topic, Sergeant Johnson's widow said she has more questions about the operation that killed her husband and three others after an ambush by ISIS-pledged militants in Niger.
Why it took them 48 hours to find my husband? Why couldn't I see my husband? I don't know what's in that box. It could be empty for all I know.
Now, as if the fact of the feud wasn't bad enough for the president and the White House, it's also bringing back questions about questionable deferments that he received during the Vietnam War. Now, Trump received several. First, because he was in college, 4 of them for that, and then because of a bone spur problem with his heel. Now, here's what he said during the campaign.
I didn't serve, I haven't served, and frankly I had deferments because of college, like a lot of people did. Numerous deferments because of college, and I had a foot thing, and I had deferment for that.
A foot thing. But during the campaign, when pressed about that mysterious heel, he told reporters he couldn't remember which foot had that bone spur problem, which to many sounded, well, suspicious. Then, over the weekend, John McCain added this comment when asked about participation in the Vietnam War.
It was a tumultuous time, and most of it was bred by the conflict. And one aspect of the conflict, by the way, that I will never, ever countenance is that we drafted the lowest income level of America, and the highest income level found a doctor that would say that they had a bone spur. That is wrong. That is wrong.
And when pressed on it again this morning on The View, Senator McCain stood by the comments, in fact made it a point to say 5 deferments, again, 4 for college and then 1 for that mysterious bone spur. So the president's feuding with the military widow or mother, the congresswoman, perhaps the most famous and revered Vietnam vet in this country right now, as well as a U.S. senator suffering from brain cancer. But they're far from alone. Last Friday, 2 former presidents took some not so thinly veiled shots at number 45.
Our politics just seems so divided and so angry and so nasty. We've got folks who are deliberately trying to make folks angry, to demonize people who have different ideas.
Bigotry seems emboldened. Our politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication. We've seen our discourse degraded by casual cruelty. We've seen nationalism distorted into nativism.
And if you think it's just in the last few days where you use former presidents, Republicans and Democrats, senior U.S. senators, Vietnam vets, widows, etc., again, that's from the last few days. Don't forget about the president's ongoing feuds with some key members of his party, or at least the Republican Party when we're coming to the Senate, who hopes he's going to certainly pin them on as it relates to passing major tax reform here and everything else. We have a razor-thin majority there. He needs every vote he can, but Bob Corker said Trump could be leading us into World War III, basically said it was adult daycare where people had to take care of him in the White House. Jeff Flake said the GOP is in denial about Trump and called the nomination of Trump a Faustian bargain. And I can go on. But let me bring in my panel right now. Jeannie Zanos, professor of political science at Iona College and also a senior advisor to the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. Vincent Velasquez is a campaign manager for Pataki for President, also worked in the New York City mayoral campaign of Joe Lhota in 2013. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent, rounds out the panel. Okay. Listen, it's a fight du jour. I get it. There's nothing new except the players and the topics. Do you think he likes it this way, the president is? That if we go a news cycle and there's not a conflict, that he almost feels he's got to start one? Yeah. Or do you think it's subconscious, that it's just...
It's hard to know. I've long since stopped trying to look into his head and see what is going on. But by his actions, he seems to prefer, whether it's conscious or subconscious to your point, this kind of conflict and controversy, whether it's a diversionary tactic, whether it's strategic, whatever it is, he seems to prefer that, or at least that's what he's willing to put out there. And I think that is what, to so many people, whether it's George W. Bush or Barack Obama, I mean, 2 people couldn't be further left and right on the spectrum, seem confounded by the fact that the president... And concerned that the president seems to be not just living in this kind of environment, but feeding it and being a leading proponent of it, which to so many people is so startling and, you know, unpresidential in that old term. And it's hard to explain why that is.
You know, Vince, it was funny. I saw General Kelly's remarks, like many of us, last week. And a lot of it very moving, very personal. Obviously, he lost a son. He talked from a firsthand experience about what it's like to be a Gold Star parent. But like so much of the story, it felt like I needed to wash my hands at the end of it. Part of me wondered if Kelly went as far as he did to go after the Congresswoman with, if not implicit directions from the White House, certainly encouragement. Like, I don't know. I don't know the man personally, but I didn't feel innately that's in his DNA. If there was a different president, I don't know if he would have gone there.
I didn't get that from General Kelly. I thought he talked from, I don't think he seems like the type of man that would go out there and talk about the death of his son in battle to advance a political narrative by the president.
I didn't mean that. What I meant was, let's do the genesis of it in abbreviated form. The president was the one who brought up General Kelly and the loss of his son, which General Kelly,
right,
who has made this an intensely private subject.
But we're skipping over a very important part of this, which was really what I believe is the unseemly part, which was when the Congresswoman goes out there and speaks to the press about how the president, you know, couldn't remember this guy's name, and started this whole unseemly discussion about whether, you know, what the president said and or what he didn't say, rather than the sacrifice of this tremendous individual, Sergeant Johnson. And but where it comes off the rails for me was this morning when the widow comes out and says what she says. That's where
You think the president has clean hands on this, that he's not responsible at all? It was a week ago today he gave the press conference. Somebody asked him why they hadn't said anything about what happened in Niger, and he turned it into a whole, I make phone calls, I call more people than anybody ever has, President Obama didn't make phone calls. I mean, that's what started this all.
No, the Congresswoman started this. The Congresswoman started this.
Vince, one thing, and I respect your perspective, I'll let you say to it, but let's just remember, to Andrew's point, it had been 2 weeks since Niger, and not a statement from the White House on it at all.
True.
The president was asked a direct question as to why he hasn't spoken about what happened in a mission that U.S. senators didn't even know were involved in. Right. He pivoted without any prompting to say that unlike previous presidents, he calls all these folks. And then this thing turned into something that I agree. I wasn't crazy how the Congresswoman handled this. The president, by the way, after Kelly gave his remarks, called the Congresswoman a wacko on Twitter. Right. So to me, he fire starts this.
And there's no unclean hands on the president's part on this too. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is how we're supposed to honor those who honor us with their sacrifice. And when the mother came out this morning, that's when the president should not have done what he would have said. In 2005, Cindy Sheehan confronted President Bush. President Bush was very empathetic, and he said at that point, "I grieve for every death, and it breaks my heart to think about a family weeping over the loss of a loved one. I sympathize with Mrs. Sheehan. She feels strongly about her position, has every right to say what she believes. This is America." The president didn't do that. He basically called the widow a liar. If he would have come out and said, "Our nation grieves the sacrifice of these fallen heroes, and we will never forget their names, and I promise you as president, I will never forget their names," I think that would have went a longer way as far as a communication strategy for this.
100%. And I agree with you.
And he dropped the ball on that. He should not have done what he did this morning, and he totally lost the narrative.
And to me, Andrew, the same thing isn't just limited to this story. I mean, take a look at the NFL issue and the whole anthem. And people have very passionate views on this. I'm not telling people how they should or shouldn't feel. But when the President of the United States takes an issue that was starting to ebb and says, you should fire all the SOBs, he inflames the situation and it becomes larger, and he continues to do it. Where literally have NFL owners reportedly saying, please ask the president to stop talking about this. He's supposed to be the adult in the room.
A couple of observations. One, it appears as though this president is so thinly skinned that anything that comes across in his mindset as being remotely critical of him must have a response. There's no level that doesn't seem to require a response from him when it seems as though he's been offended or somebody seems to have attacked
him. Wait a minute, say to that though. 2 presidents, we just played the clips. Yeah. Anybody, I think, in the right mind knows who he's talking about. But because he didn't say his name, the president says he wasn't talking about me.
Well, I think this leads to my second point, which is that, and this harkens back to the Roy Cohn school from which Trump graduated, which goes all the way back to the McCarthyism era in Congress, which is deny everything and attack the people who are accusing you as vociferously, if not more so, than they're attacking you. That was Roy Cohn's strategy, that was Senator McCarthy's strategy, and that's President Trump's strategy. So whenever there's an issue that bubbles up, he comes back with both barrels, and it winds up escalating the whole thing. It has the very nice added impact or added effect for the White House of creating such chaos in the news cycle and distracting everybody's attention that everybody starts chasing down this latest kerfuffle, and whatever the news of the day was going in or whatever the underlying narrative is going in, that gets lost in the shuffle. So there's so many balls up in the air. It's hard to keep your eye on Russia, or it's hard to keep your eye on North Korea when there's the NFL, when there's the widow, when everything winds up popping up.
I think that's an effective strategy, but not on this issue. Not when you're the president of the United States and you're dealing with a soldier who was killed in action. He should not have gone on this. And that's why John McCain came out, because he has the credibility, and he basically stepped on the president saying, you've never worn the uniform.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's effective.
There was a Medal of Honor ceremony today, and while it wasn't with controversy, I'm sure I wasn't alone when I watched those 2 men standing up there, and they were talking about the selflessness and the bravery of this medic in Vietnam 45 years ago, and the actions he took for his unit, and putting their interest before his own, and refusing medical care until they got care after helping with the saving of 60, 70 lives. And I said to myself, is the guy given the medal, what would he do? And none of us know what we do, let's be honest, but that's where this is all coming to. And I just think there's a cost to us as a country here. I don't think I think whatever divisions always existed are being so born raw. Anyway, okay, coming up next. Horrific claims against some big names as we continue to learn much more about the sexual harassment charges that led to Hollywood turning its back on Harvey Weinstein. Now, new details on the downfall of Bill O'Reilly at Fox News. If you thought you knew the whole story, well, this weekend we learn more. The numbers, the details, head spinning.